shall we say, has changed these days in light of the election.
That does it for us here on The Hill. I'll see you back tomorrow.
No,
go get him, brother. Oh, no, not tomorrow. Monday. Oh, my gosh, it's the weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Go get him.
All right. These news cycles do that to you. That's just what happens. And we start at 7 p.m. Eastern with breaking news once again. There is no stop in the Trump show. It just keeps rolling on. From Mar-a-Lago, President-elect Donald Trump has appointed Caroline Levitt to serve as the next White House press secretary. In terms of someone who has worked their way all the way up, it is Caroline and shown great dedication to President Trump. She served as the national press secretary for Trump's campaign. In his announcement, the president described her as smart, tough, and highly effective. Also tonight, we're waiting for a few more key announcements, including Secretary of Education and Treasury. And with that, we welcome you to the Ferris Network on television. And first tonight, it's been a week. The first week of the transition. This isn't even the first full week of the administration. Trump's cabinet picks this week prove two things. Donald Trump wants to burn the Washington establishment to the ground, and he believes he has a mandate to do it.
It's all about common sense. I mean, we're conservative in this room, but we can understand the other side. But what we really are is people with common sense. And I think that's why we won with the numbers that we won by.
Whether he can burn Washington to the ground is an entirely different question. He wants to. A lot of people want him to. Doing it is a little harder. Washington establishment is built to protect Washington establishment and serve the establishment above all else. With each and every one of his cabinet picks, he is daring anyone to try and stop him. The resistance to Trump through his first term and his election, so for the past 10 years, was all about threats to democracy, how Donald Trump somehow was going to end the republic. Those warnings from Democrats didn't work. But now Donald Trump is giving Democrats perhaps some home field advantage. And to be fair, not only Democrats, but Republicans who oppose him as well. His cabinet picks open up attacks on competence, ethics, and their own history. Trump is learning quickly that their records are a problem. We're already seeing opposition research dumps on a number of his picks. And even Republicans are not necessarily all in line or happy. Take, for example, the fight over Matt Gaetz, the designee for Attorney General. He's been investigated for sexual misconduct with a minor. Gaetz resigned from Congress 2 days before an ethics report was set to detail his possible sexual indiscretions with a 17-year-old girl. Even some big-name Republicans are now pushing the House Ethics Committee to release that report with their findings.
I think there should not be any limitation on the Senate Judiciary Committee's investigation, including whatever the House Ethics Committee has generated.
So you want to see it?
Absolutely.
I think everybody wants to see what that report says because it will either vindicate Representative Gaetz or not.
That's another Florida Republican. Then there's Defense Secretary designee Pete Hegseth, who was allegedly named in a sexual assault allegation in 2017, investigated by police and never charged. Trump's pick for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., also faces serious questions tonight, not only from the left, they don't much like his views on vaccines, but from the right as well. Former Vice President Mike Pence calls Kennedy an abortion lover. And the right-leaning New York Post came out against Kennedy, saying his appointment would break the first rule of medicine, do no harm. Noteworthy, the New York Post is owned by Rupert Murdoch, sending a message. Fox News, the anchors of Fox and Friends, President Trump's favorite morning show, also criticized Matt Gaetz. Something's happening. Even if those three candidates are confirmed, none of them have experience running big organizations with thousands or hundreds of thousands of staffers and trillions of dollars worth of budget. Knowing how a bureaucracy works and having experience in one is very helpful if you want to tear it apart. Bureaucracies protect themselves. Trump's last attempt at burning down the establishment, 2017, failed. Most notably, his promise to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, ended in the early morning hours of July 28, 2017, thanks to John McCain. That loss for Republicans, especially the Trump world, still stings today. So think about Trump's cabinet so far. if he loses more than one cabinet confirmation fight, he will be seen as by the establishment of both parties and D.C. at all as a paper tiger. Political capital is like a muscle. If you don't win, it goes away. That is a very tough place for a lame duck president before he is even sworn in, with a mandate or not. We begin tonight with Roman Davari, who served as Deputy Director of Strategic Communications, first Trump administration. Phil Wegman, Real Clear Politics White House correspondent. Phil, the days of Thursday at 4 p.m. starting the weekend have ended for you, as it has for all of us. Take us through the Donald Trump plan for filling out the transition. Is this just Trump being Trump?
Rewind to the campaign, because one thing that I've been struck by is that we heard from the Trump transition team, for instance, that Project 2025 was radioactive. And then we saw many Project 2025 folks actually make their way into the administration. And in some cases, they're running parts of the transition. There was a similar dynamic with RFK Jr. We heard from the Trump transition team that no, he wouldn't be named to be HHS secretary. And then that happened. So I think that what you can take away from this is that while some of these picks are certainly controversial and might face an uphill battle and getting confirmed in the Senate, what they do reflect is that this time there's no senior staffer. There's no outside organization that is whispering in Donald Trump's ear and forcing his hand. He's making his own decisions, and right now he feels like he's not a political novice. He lived through 2016 and 2017. He wants loyalists, and he wants his people in there. Controversy be damned.
Fair.
Absolutely. And the other thing to remember is that this is what the American people voted for. Not a single American that marked President Trump on their ballot was confused about what he was going to do should he get elected. These are the type of rebels, if you want to call them that, fighters that President Trump has been talking about appointing into the government since he got on the campaign trail. So it's no surprise that we have a wide variety of names, some of which don't have government experience. Those are the entrepreneurs that he knows and loves.
I think it's fair to say, though, there's a difference between not having government experience, or even in the case of Matt Gaetz, having experience in government, and actually having the skill set needed to tear apart a bureaucracy. You think about how Doug Burgum reformed North Dakota, now going to Interior. That's somebody who has experience massively reforming bureaucracies. Pete Hegseth and Matt Gaetz have no such experience in terms of managing bureaucracies or being executives. Aside from loyalty and wanting to burn the House down, which I understand, you're right, people voted for that, what qualifications do they have?
Well, we can dive into the details of their resumes. I mean, Pete Hegseth is an Ivy League. He spent 20 years in the military, 2 Bronze Stars. You know, specifically talking about him, the rank and file is very excited about it. You talk to young white men who are worried about woke military. They're very excited to have someone like Pete Hegseth taking the reins because they feel like they're not being represented.
Can we not agree that there's a difference, though, between people being excited about you because of what book you wrote or your clips on Twitter versus actually being able to follow through and deliver on what you're saying you can do?
Well, I would argue that the Biden administration has all the qualifications in the world,
true.
And they haven't delivered on nearly anything. Well, we have war raging overseas, and they have supposedly the best, strongest military representatives that this country has ever seen. We didn't even hear from him. The president didn't know that our military leader was in the hospital for a period of time while war was raging overseas. There's no communication amongst the Biden administration. At least here, you know that you're going to hear everything that's going on. The American people are going to know what's happening in their government.
Well, Donald Trump has never met a camera that he doesn't like. So they're hearing from the president. I think we'll hear from him a lot more than we did Joe Biden. This brings up an important point. I was talking to him in the break with Blake. Donald Trump demands loyalty. That's sort of how he has picked this cabinet. I think you can say Matt Gaetz, Pete Hegseth. Hard to find 2 people who have been more loyal to him through thick and thin. And look, Eric Holder said I was Barack Obama's wingman. So no issue there. But showing loyalty down has not exactly been Donald Trump's strong suit. Notable past Trump officials who weren't confirmed: Ronnie Jackson, VA Secretary; Rob Porter, White House aide, who had to depart, shall we say; Patrick Shanahan, Defense Secretary; Andrew Pudsner, Labor Secretary; Todd Ricketts, Deputy Commerce secretary. These are people who had some serious issues, by and large. Is there a backup plan, you think?
I'm not certain if there's a backup plan. One thing that I've been struck by as we look at the transition is that there have not been a lot of leaks. A lot of these nominations and appointments have come out like clockwork. It seems like a much more professional operation. He's not as much of a novice this time around. But to your point, folks in the inner circle who are loyalists and have been around for a long time, for instance, like a Stephen Miller, they have returned to the fold. Otherwise, though, if you look at a number of these picks, yes, they are folks who were loyal to Donald Trump. For instance, Senator Marco Rubio, who got named as his state nominee, they were kind of on the periphery of the circle last time. This is a new cabinet, not necessarily, just a repeat of what we saw previously. And, there's some reports that, this is going to be a real battle for a lot of these confirmations. But let's look at past precedent. Donald Trump didn't walk away from Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh when he faced some pretty troubled waters. Yep. I don't think that, this president is going to blink. And when I talk to, Republican senators, Mike Lee, Lindsey Graham, they have told me that they are of the opinion that for the most part, barring some extreme circumstances, Donald Trump's going to get his man who he wants in the cabinet.
Well, and look, you point out, majority of Americans voted for Donald Trump. He told us exactly what he was going to do. That is the prerogative of the president-elect who becomes the president to have those he wants by his side. The issue of Matt Gaetz is maybe different just in terms of how much political capital Donald Trump has to use up to push him through. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, who's going to be in Mar-a-Lago, was talking today about the ethics report that's now sort of on ice because the Ethics Committee doesn't issue reports on people who are no longer in the House of Representatives. Take a listen.
I do not believe that is an appropriate thing. It doesn't follow our rules and traditions, and there is a reason for that. It would open a Pandora's box. I don't think that's a healthy thing for the institution.
Interesting perspective. I think you needed some serious gymnastic skills to get that figured out. But, Roma, at some point, when you become a liability, then you have to move on. At what point does Republicans, before Donald Trump's even in office, covering up an ethics report about a cabinet secretary involved in sexual misconduct allegations become a problem?
I want to just rewind here because the main thing in this story is that it's an allegation. And there have been many allegations thrown at many members of the Republican Party that are in positions of power, President Donald Trump included. We heard Russia, Russia, Russia for years and years and years. So when you ask the American people if they truly care about an allegation, whether it be Matt Gaetz or something else, I don't know that they are because they feel as though they've been fed these lies for so long. So if and when something does become proofed, this is not there yet. And
hold on. I was with you for a while, okay? And there have been a lot of allegations that were unfounded. When you have a Republican senator on the Judiciary Committee saying, we want to see this report, and Republicans are saying, we're not going to let you see the report, if the report clears him, you would release it. If everybody thought Matt Gaetz...
Well, it's not everybody, though. It's one Republican senator, right? And we all know that
multiple
President
House
Trump...
members and everything else. If Republicans thought and believed that this report would clear Matt Gaetz, if Matt Gaetz believed this report would clear Matt Gaetz, he would say, release it and release it now.
Well, maybe he will. We don't know yet. All we know is that he's resigned from Congress and that the Speaker has said that we don't need this report anymore. He's not a member of Congress. They're actually following precedent here. And the DOJ dropped this case. Did one exist before? Because there was a lack of evidence there. So this is not a legal, hearing. This is an investigation by Congress. He's no longer a congressman. If they want to bring all of this up during his confirmation hearing,
I think they
surely can.
They certainly will. Look, this report is a grenade. The only question is when is it going to go off? Because I would be very surprised if it doesn't leak. The question is who's going to leak it. Is it going to be Democrats who are going to hold on to it until right ahead of his confirmation hearing to maximize damage? Or is it going to be Republicans who are going to say, look, we served with this guy. For instance, Mark Wayne Mullen, he brought up some unsavory behavior that certainly wasn't criminal but was questionable. Do we want this report to come out now so that the president-elect can have perhaps perhaps a second opportunity. I heard today from leadership aides in the Senate that the idea that Gaetz just wanted to resign and wasn't serious about the AG confirmation, that's nonsense. He's calling Republican senators currently. He's arguing his case. And what he's hearing back in some circumstances is they want to see the allegations. Right. They want to see the evidence. And he better steel himself for battle, because it's going to be
we will see how much political capital Donald Trump is willing to spend. That's just the way we got to run. But that's just the way it is. We'll see how much protection Donald Trump gives. He twists enough arms. He's got a lot of political capital with Republican senators for sure. Thank you both. We appreciate it. Pharmaceutical industry is the biggest lobbying group in Washington. They're the ones who buy out all the fancy restaurants around here. RFK and the fight against Big Pharma? Well, who wins? RFK or Big Pharma? Why you should bet on RFK when we come back.
Did him for, I guess, if you like health and if you like people that live a long time, it's the most important position. RFK Jr. Bobby. People like you, Bobby. Don't get too popular, Bobby. You know, we want you to come up with things and ideas and what you've been talking about for a long time, and I think you're going to do some unbelievable thing. Nobody's going to be able to do it like you.
That was President-elect Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago after nominating Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to head the Department of Health and Human Services. Ironically, but unsurprisingly for Trump, RFK woke up this morning wildly unpopular with the mainstream media.
So Trump's latest cabinet nominee is RFK Jr. for, wait for it, the head of Health and Human Services.
Saying that RFK Jr. is a vaccine skeptic is really putting it lightly.
You're talking about a person that is literally a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist.
Bobby Kennedy said he had a brain worm, who bragged about taking roadkill bear and placing it in Central Park, who carved off a whale's head.
I know, that sounds insane, but we should all keep an open mind, because that's how the worm gets in.
Doesn't end then or there. The New York Post editorial board, noteworthy, owned by Rupert Murdoch, came out with a piece this morning with the headline, "Putting RFK Jr. in charge of health breaks the first rule of medicine." That first rule being do no harm. It's only going to get uglier because the pharmaceutical industry spends more money lobbying in Washington than anybody else. And Big Pharma hates Bobby Kennedy, probably as much as Bobby Kennedy hates Big Pharma. So for as much as Big Pharma hates Kennedy, Team MAGA loves him. In fact, Elon Musk retweeted our segment last night about Kennedy that set this record straight on Kennedy's feelings about vaccines.
He has no vaccine denialism. He wants vaccines subjected to the same scientific rigor as all the other medication that people like me are allowed by the FDA to bring to market. So we could use these things. As it is an entirely different operation with no liability to speak of. And there may be really significant problems with these vaccines. At least we should be able to ask the questions.
With us now, Peter Pitts, former Associate Commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Is Bobby Kennedy getting treated fairly?
Of course not. This is Washington. Why should he expect to be treated fairly? He's a Trump nominee. Why should he be expected to be treated fairly? You know, he is against lots of things. Some of the opinions I don't agree with, but he is against the status quo. And I think giving the status quo a swift kick in the ass is a good thing. It keeps people on their toes. It's creative destruction. And if we can get some positive outcomes, because people are actually thinking about doing something different, that's all to the good. And people want to marginalize themselves and make from a Bobby Kennedy, that's their privilege. I believe in positive engagement. I'm not going to trivialize myself before the administration has even begun. You know, whether the guy knows what he's doing remains to be seen. But he's there. He's a status quo buster, and he has to be dealt with. So let's do that positively and seek some real positive change.
Whether it be RFK Jr. or Matt Gaetz or Pete Hegseth at DOD, there is this feeling that this one person at the head, by nominating this one cabinet secretary, they are going to tear apart the Washington bureaucracy and the agencies. In fact, here's Bobby Kennedy talking about how he may send NIH employees that he can't fire, National Institute of Health employees, to Guam. Take a listen.
We're going to fire on day one, or if you can't fire them, we can ship them to a new HHS headquarters in Guam.
Everybody roars, everybody laughs, but doesn't that sort of say the quiet part out loud, that dismantling these bureaucracies is next to impossible?
I think that's exactly right. I think the people at FDA, for example, the 20,000 employees of FDA are incredibly devoted. They really care about their jobs. They're on personal public health missions. Does that mean they do everything right all the time? It certainly does not. But when someone comes in from the outside, they've got to earn the respect of the career staff, but they've got to give the new secretary the respect that the position deserves. They've got to listen to what he wants. They've got to answer him. You want to talk about vaccines? That's great. Let's talk about vaccines. Maybe it's an opportunity to restore America's faith in the FDA and vaccines. It's an opportunity. He wants to talk about reforming the FDA's nutrition programs. They need to be reformed. You know, if we want to think about diet and exercise as a key foundation of lowering healthcare costs in this country, let's do that. Let's talk about animal vaccines. That's incredibly important. Let's talk about dealing with the supply chain and drug shortages. These are things that have been going on for too long. They are real dangers to our public health. Maybe it takes an outsider to focus on things other than the price of drugs.
No, I hear you, Peter. And you think about 1960s versus now, obesity rate from 13% to 40%, diabetes rate from 2% to 12%, healthcare spending 5% of GDP up to 17% of GDP. So we're paying a lot more and getting far worse results. To your point, there's something wrong. There's the conversations we're having, as well-intentioned as our public health officials are, they haven't been getting us results. You need to have a conversation about that. This is more about just sort of how bureaucracies work. And what I'm hearing from you is that perhaps Donald Trump's supporters, of which there are many, and understandably they're angry about how things in America are, their idea that just appointing these cabinet secretaries would be some kind of panacea and these massive bureaucracies are going to change because Bobby Kennedy shows up at HHS, it just seems a little far-fetched to me.
Well, it's naive. It's like out of the movies where one day a new guy comes in and the next day everything's beautiful. That's not the way that it works. But the secretary can, for example, appoint an innovation czar. He can say, I control FDA and CDC and NIH and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I want one person on top of all of that to drive innovation and cost savings and make sure that all these pieces work together. And that can have systemic changes even after any given secretary or any given administration leaves office. Success really happens if you can change systemically the way a bureaucracy works. And it's hard and it takes time and effort, but it can be done with focus and knowledge. And that's why any secretary needs to have people below him or her that really understand how the bureaucracy works so they can change it.
Yeah, it's very difficult to change it when you don't have that second tier or third tier of deputy assistant secretaries on and on. Peter, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
My pleasure. Thank you. You too.
Democrats will spend this weekend fighting amongst themselves about fighting amongst themselves. But there is one man they might bring in. He is on the bench, and it should terrify Donald Trump. We'll see you in a minute. Live pictures of Mar-a-Lago. You can see the supermoon, last supermoon of the year, reflecting on the waves there. House Speaker Mike Johnson is scheduled to spend this weekend with President-elect Donald Trump. We spend a lot of time talking about the normies versus MAGA of the Republican Party. There's at least a small indication that that sort of breakdown could apply to Democrats. They're looking to Team Normal to bring them back from the extremes of the far left. Nothing is more normal than the hammer. Former Obama chief of staff and mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel. This week, he told Puck magazine that he knows how to fix the Democratic Party. Quote, Democrats need to put aside purity tests and find candidates who aren't afraid to piss off the language police and progressive scolds that seem to spook so many operatives in the parties. If you know Rahm Emanuel, that is him without salty language. Axios reports Emanuel might run for Democratic National Committee chair. He would have to bring together a party that currently is fighting amongst each other about fighting over each other. Axios reports the rank and file are now angry with Nancy Pelosi. She used to run things with an iron fist. She needs to take a seat. Quote, one Democratic leader said she needs to take a seat. quote, making scattershot comments is not just unhelpful, it is damaging. Illinois Congressman Raj Krishnamurthy is with us now. Congressman, it is good to see you. Thank you. Rahm Emanuel was famous, perhaps, for one comment about crises. Take a listen.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
Do Democrats have a serious crisis right now?
Well, I think we definitely have to figure out how to win again. Obviously, a lot of us did win. I won with 14-point margin here in the suburbs. But I think that what we need to do is focus on those economic problems that beset people. Right now, we are not connecting with people where they feel their most kind of pain, if you will, which is how do they achieve their economic aspirations, whether they are working poor or whether they're in the middle class or whether they're growing a business. We need to help them on climbing the up escalator of the economy.
Understood the economic issue, but there was something that Republicans tapped into culturally. And your point's taken. There were a lot of Democrats who won re-election by big numbers, fine. But in the city of Chicago, the vote moved 25 points to Donald Trump. He didn't have a chance in Chicago. But it's clear that across the country, in almost every county in America, became more red. That was because of economics, but there was a cultural part of this as well. Does Democrats have to change their messaging on that and be willing to do what Rahm Emanuel said when it comes to ignoring the language police? Sure. And I think that people should be able to speak their minds as long as they do so respectfully. And I think my biggest observation, though, is that, you know, when you don't meet people where they are economically, they aren't really willing to go along with you on those cultural issues either. And so I think that first and foremost, we need to kind of address, you know, what ails them economically, not talk about, you know, how great our economy is relative to the rest of the world. People don't really care about that if they can't make ends meet. Right. First deal with that issue and then deal with the rest. Can I just take one example? One thing that I focused on quite a bit in my time in Congress and in this campaign, in this election cycle, is skills-based and vocational education. Working with Republicans, I helped to modernize our nation's vocational education system, which takes care of the 2/3 of Americans who aren't going to college. And that is an area where we Democrats need to focus a lot more attention and resources, because we don't have a world class. I understand. I get that. And I think it's an important thing. But voters in the middle roundly rejected what you said, right? That President Biden kept talking about how great the worldwide economy is, and people were sitting there saying, I can't afford groceries. I don't care that we're doing better than Japan in GDP growth. But they want to hear a change from the economic message of Joe Biden. And what I'm trying to get at is in order to do that, don't you have to articulate what Joe Biden, what Democrats did wrong for the past 4 years if you're going to say we're now going to change it? Yes, I think we have to kind of admit that it's not enough to talk about, for instance, slowing the rate of inflation. We have to talk about how do we lower the cost of living? How do you make sure that, for instance, healthcare and housing are more affordable so that people feel like, you know, they can attain their economic goals? All right. Congressman, appreciate you being here. As always, thank you. You're always willing to discuss this. And boy, when it comes to skills-based learning, the vocational learning, that's one of the big differences we've seen in Republican and Democratic voters, the diploma divide. If you can get back working class voters, that'll be something for Democrats. It's good to see you, sir. Have a great weekend. One thing on that, Leland. The vast majority of people who voted did not have a four-year college degree. Yep. And the majority of them voted Republican in this election. Could not have said it better myself, sir. It's good to see you. Thank you very much. A lot more on the breakdown of voting on the NN app. That is our app. You can get it on for free. You can watch us anywhere, anytime. You can also keep up on the day's news in case you perhaps miss things, have something other to do all day than watch cable TV, with our newsletter, warnotes.com to subscribe. It is a free newsletter, comes out every day at 4 p.m. You can reply. We read them all. Get to some of them on air. Warnotes.com to subscribe, at Leland Vittert on social media. Speaking of education, Donald Trump promised over and over again to abolish the Department of Education. Why the teachers union might become an unusual ally in that effort. Are holding central casting-like calls for his incoming cabinet, a key position we're waiting for. Secretary of Education, the president-elect, is reportedly considering a number of candidates, most notably Oklahoma State Superintendent Ryan Walters, who is pushing a national Bible in schools mandate. Louisiana State Superintendent of Education Cade Brumley, who backs a law requiring the 10 Commandments in classrooms, and co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Tiffany Justice, who pioneered book bans of sexually explicit material across the state of Florida. Whoever is tapped for education secretary, well, a number of them will tell you they would like to be the last person to ever hold that position. Trump has long promised to dismantle the DOE, but he'll need Congress to approve it. Here's more of his plan for education in Trump's second administration.
When I'm president, we will put parents back in charge and give them the final say. Abolish teacher tenure for grades K through 12 so we can remove bad teachers and adopt merit pay. Implement the direct election of school principals by the parents. It's all about the parents for their children.
With us now, Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Nice to see you on this Friday. The teachers we talk to, and I know some union groups, have often blamed D.C., the Department of Education, for too many mandates, low test scores, too much bureaucracy in education. Would teachers also be better off without the Department of Education?
So, and I'm sure this is going to surprise people. My union, one of my predecessors, Al Shanker, in 1977, was actually not enthused about having a Department of Education for all the reasons you just said, for all the bureaucracy and things like that. The issue about bureaucracy and all of that is something that, teachers resonate to. So that's why the issue about whether or not they closed the Department of Education that's not the issue for us. The real issue, and you'd hear this from teachers all across America, particularly in red states that get more of this money than in blue states, is that the money that gets meted out by the Department of Education, passed by Congress, but meted out by the Department of Education, that money goes to kids with disabilities. So over the past couple of decades, American students falling behind other nations. 28 out of 37th in math, that's down from 18th in 2000. 12 out of 37th in science, improved from 14th in 2000. 6th out of 37th in reading, unchanged from 2000. And over that time, your union and teachers' unions have progressively gotten more and more powerful. And more money has been spent on education with really a marginal, if not negative, return on investment for the American taxpayer, for parents. Is it time that the teachers' unions accept some responsibility for that, as Donald Trump wants them to take? So, let's actually talk about what teachers do. First off, let me just say, I think we all should be responsible for our kids. And frankly, the things that we are suggesting to do are things that help kids graduate on time and graduate with careers. So if we were listened to a lot more, I think that we'd see the kind of results that you just talked about and that we see in other places in the world. So let's do things differently in terms of really helping meet all kids' needs. And frankly, I'm as frustrated as everybody else that teachers don't get listened to the way in which they should. The blaming, the smearing, the this, the that, it's ridiculous. Teachers want what kids need, and let's try to strengthen public education and do things differently. And I think that you'd see a lot more.
I appreciate it's the third
support.
time you said do things differently, and I understand that. Part of doing things differently is getting different people into Washington to advocate for that. Notable AFT-backed candidates who lost: John Tester in Montana, Bob Kennedy in Pennsylvania, Debbie Musgrove-Powell in Florida, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, all Democrats, Susan Wild, Pennsylvania, Matt Cartwright, Pennsylvania, Mondaire Jones in New York. Based on who you all are spending your money on, and that the American people and the citizens of those states roundly rejected them, does that not say your priorities, the AFT's priorities, are out of touch with the voters?
Well, let's see. I'm surprised that you did a picking and choosing, since most of the candidates that we supported actually won. The presidential candidate didn't, but most of them won. But this is what's really interesting. On a head-to-head on issues of education, the 3 voucher ballot initiatives, the position we took, which was supporting public schools, it won in all 3 of them. People love their public schools, their local public schools, and frankly, in terms of the union movement, 7 out of 10 people in the United States of America want to have unions for themselves and for others. So the
unions have never been
here,
more popular. We've done the story
right.
over and over again. Let me just ask one more, because I think you're right. And it always seems to me with teachers, it's a little bit like Congress. People hate Congress, but they love their congressman. Right. There's an interesting sort of data point there. I can't figure out what it is, or psychiatry or psychology to that. But the most successful ad for Donald Trump and Republicans this cycle was this ad that ended, "Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you." Here it is.
Kamala even supports letting biological men compete against our girls in their sports. Kamala is for they, them. President Trump is for you.
Is it time for teachers to get back to reading, writing, arithmetic, and away from the social justice and social change issues that have become so polarizing in our schools over the past 3 or 4 years?
Let me just say this to you. First off, you can't get a kid an aspirin in their school without asking their parents. So the fear-mongering that this ad did was a problem in terms of America. Having said that, we have an obligation to our kids and our families to meet them where they are and to help them regardless of where they are. And so some of our kids are transgendered, some of our kids are gay, some of our kids are white dudes.
I was going to say, a lot of them are wearing MAGA hats and pretty conservative now.
Right. But we have to work with parents. We have to help all kids achieve. But the one thing I want to be careful about is that a kid that's bullied, a kid that's different, we have an obligation to that kid as well. And that's who we are as teachers.
All right. I promised you the last 30. I gave you the last 90 seconds. Randy, thank you very much. Have a beautiful weekend.
You too. Take care.
All right. Take care. Donald Trump's election created the hottest real estate market in the country. Who's spending big money to be close to the MAGA king? All right, we're back on a Friday night looking at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, a.k.a. the Winter White House. Last night, the president-elect welcomed a who's who of MAGA world, dressed in ball gowns and their finest jewels. Mar-a-Lago appears to have a new resident, or at least visitor, that's been staying for a long time, Elon Musk.
What a job he does. And he happens to be a really good guy. You know, he likes this place. I can't get him out of here. He just likes this place. And you know what? I like having him here, too.
As the world's richest man, Musk could afford any of the houses, the mansions in Palm Beach. A bunch are listed for over $100 million, and they are going quick.
I think post-election, there's most certainly been a Trump bump. Now, with election clarity and with Trump in office, we have seen, even in the last week since the election, we've seen 100 million of properties go pending. We just put another 25 million pending yesterday. So the market has been strong, and specifically in the last week, strong.
Let's be honest. There's a lot of people who want to be close to the president-elect. So Elon Musk may want to move quickly on a new purchase. At least one of the $100 million mansions he wants to live in gets taken. We saw President Trump in the past raise the prices to join Mar-a-Lago so he can be really close to President Trump. The prices are going up in Palm Beach. It's been a wild, wild news week. And that means sometimes you miss truly extraordinary things, especially with as quickly as news happens during Trump world. This isn't even the Trump administration. This is Trump transition. And already it feels like we've had a month's worth of news in 1 week. But something happened we thought we should tell you about. It's important. And it's extraordinary. Something happened that rarely happens in Washington. A politician did something you never hear of. They apologized and took responsibility. House Foreign Affairs Chair Representative Michael McCaul, Republican of Texas, got detained at Dulles Airport. He says he took an Ambien after a few cocktails. A statement read in part 2 weekends ago, "I made a mistake, one for which I take full responsibility. This incident does not reflect who I am and who I strive to be. As a human, I am not perfect, but I am determined to learn from this mistake and, God willing, make myself a better person." Police detained the congressman for a couple of hours until a family member came and picked him up. Washington right now is all abuzz about cabinet jobs. There's some serious questions about the character of the person nominated for Attorney General and for Secretary of Defense. Just a proposal on this Saturday night. Don't know anything about Michael McCaul's qualifications. He is chair of Foreign Relations. But in terms of character, he has something that almost no one in Washington has. The willingness to say he's wrong, he made a mistake, and to tell the truth about it. Hard to imagine that simply doing the right thing, doing what we were all told to do as kids, all taught to do as children, gets you on TV, because it's extraordinary that it happened. A politician doing the right thing in Washington. There is hope. Brian Enton's in for Chris Cuomo. I'll see you on Monday.